bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? How are you doing? Today is Wednesday. It is Wednesday, March 6th, 2024. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What a great week we've had on Fade to Black. We're already halfway through the week. Tonight, Dr. Heather Lynn is with us, Xenoarchaeology. Tomorrow night, Brigitte Barclay is with us, and we're going to be talking about her 1993 Brentwood, California alien abduction. And it's a huge case, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow night with Brigitte. Very excited about that. Great week here on the show. And continuing, so tonight, it seems like I say this every night, but you know what? It's my show, and I interview and do what I want, right? I have very specific instruction sets that I give to the production team. You know what I like? I like this. I like this. I like this. So that's the and sometimes on a show I get to do both. And so tonight with Dr. Lynn, we can do science. We can do history. We can do astronomy. We can do xenoarchaeology. We can talk aliens. We can talk ET, contact, disclosure. It's like all of my favorite things all wrapped up in one show. And it's going to be an amazing conversation tonight, because how many nights a month do we talk and discuss science with astronomers and physicists and UFO researchers about exoplanets and the search for alien life and what's going on on Mars, right? What's going on in Europa? Well, that's in our star system. How about beyond that, and the work of TESS and the James Webb Space Telescope and Hubble and searching out into the heavens and getting further and further and further out into our universe? How many you can't count. This is where my focus is, right? It just goes in that direction. And tonight we're going to do that. We're going to discuss all of that and much more, because she is a historian of the human mind. She's a cognitive archaeologist. She's an author of fringe topics such as hidden history, my favorite subject, right? Mythology, my favorite subject. How can they all be your favorites? The occult, the hidden, right? Ancient aliens. Wait a minute. That's right. They're all at the top of my list. She's been on all the radio shows and all, but now she's the host of her own podcast. We'll be talking about that too as well. Her website is below, drheatherlynn.com. You can get all of her books there too as well. And I'm so happy to say this. Welcome back, Dr. Heather Lynn. Heather, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
And I'm great.
Good.
I'm great. Not complaining. The house smells good.
Hey, well, it's better than smelling bad, I suppose.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. But it's been a minute, and there's one thing that I've always thought about you, and I have had this comment about you so many times after you've done the show. Her voice.
Oh,
the intelligence is there, right? But it's the conversation, and you are like the perfect show host.
Oh,
you are. I mean, you've got that going. So, can we actually start there for a second, if that's
sure.
okay? Okay, let's
Absolutely.
start there. Well, we've got a long night in front of us with so many different subjects we're going to jump into, and the new book is great, so we'll get to that.
Mhm.
But in today's world, if you have got, there's a lot of hosts out there now, right?
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of computers. There's this thing called the internet, right? and so everybody, and they should, if you think you've got it, wants to be a host, wants to channel, wants to live stream and do all of the gamers and Twitch and whatever, right? But if you have the information, people will come to you. And then if you have the gift of a voice and delivery, that's it. You don't have to have the man tell you no. You
Mm.
can go and chart your own course and do your thing and find your bliss. And that isn't that a great place to be today? If you've got it, they will come.
I think that everybody now has access, which is the most important thing, and we'll see how it goes, right? It's sort of like imagine having a basketball court and everybody's allowed to play now. Realistically, some people are maybe like me, 5'1",
Right.
but and then so you get on the basketball court and you have to know that you're going to, do pretty well, but then also there are going to be the LeBron James and people like that, and so it's not about competition. It's about coming into a space and like you said, following your bliss, and it's fair game, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity. The world is very big. The interwebs are huge. And so there's something for everybody. And most importantly, while we still have some level of freedom online, I think it's important to carve out a niche for yourself to have that voice. It's a very effective way to reach people and very fun too. So,
Right.
but
And as long as you stay authentic. Right?
oh, for sure.
Be yourself. Don't. I had a friend, close friend. He goes, "Okay, man," and I'm talking about one of the most smartest people that I know, very well researched,
Mm,
and having dinner with this person was always an amazing experience. Where I talk a lot, I do. And even I would back off and just go, man, and just sit there and listen. It was just incredible. So then he calls me up. This is many years ago. Okay, man, I have started a podcast, built a nice studio, and he sends me his first episode before it aired. All right, and I
mm,
pop it in. He was the opposite of who he was in
mm.
person. And so he's like, "Hey, well, welcome to the podcast." And I was like, who is this guy? Wait. And that's the problem.
Mhm.
Right. And if there's one lesson anybody out there that can learn that wants to get into this space, is there a secret sauce? Is there, well, you know what? Do that. Be yourself. Right.
That's
Don't.
advice. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't put on a mask and be something that you think you should be. Just be the person that you are.
People are tired of fraudulence. I mean, I think we're all used to that. We kind of all grew up in this world where everything was so constructed, and we've seen behind the curtain. And so now it's time to just, get out there and do what you have that's special, and people will gravitate to it, I believe. And you don't have to have everybody. You can, like I said, carve out your niche and do something that's meaningful to you. And that's one of the reasons I entered this, sphere. I'm still writing books and doing that sort of thing. And like we talked about a little bit before, I officially quit teaching. Yes, I did that once before, but then I went back. It was like a bad relationship, like I can't quit you, academia.
Right.
So I
Right.
did though quit because it's gotten so bad that it's just not worth it, not worth my safety. I mean, I had somebody in my class write a literal manifesto, kill list and everything. It was just a lot of drama and not worth it for me. So I left and I thought, I'm going to, as Joseph Campbell and you have said, follow your bliss. And I'll say though something about that, and I would teach this in my class about the monomyth and this sort of thing. And who am I to argue against the great Joseph Campbell when he said, "Follow your bliss"? But I always like to tell my students to follow their passion. And at first you think, oh well, what's the difference, right? Passion, passionate love, passion is just so good. But passion, the word actually comes from the Latin for suffering. So when you thinking like Christianity, the passion of the Christ, it's like, well, the suffering. So then it's peculiar. So why would you want to follow your passion if your passion is suffering? And so it's about meaning making. And if you find something that is worth the suffering necessary to achieve it, I think that's key. So it can be blissful, but the reality is suffering. I mean, most religions and Eastern thought and all sorts of cultures have agreed on one thing, that humanity suffers, and it's hard to get away from that. So if you embrace the suffering and make it a meaningful sacrifice, I think that will go a long way. So passion, follow your passion. It sounds a little empty and trite, but when you think about it in the context of what is it that's so worth doing to me, that it'll be worth the suffering necessary to achieve it. And that's going to be different for everythody. So I'm sure there's
okay, that sounds all philosophical and fresh and everything. It does. I think it's more sciencey. That's the way the universe works. Right? Mm-hmm. There's no positive without a negative.
Absolutely.
Right? There's no black without white. There's, to get energy, you have to put something into it. There's always this trade-off. There is no free ride. Right? Yeah. When I tell people, they go, okay, man, so how'd you do it? I go, I did. How? 7 days a week, 20 hours a day for 10 years. That's how I did it. Yeah. What's your plan? And when you tell that to some, they're like, wait, you mean I just don't get a microphone from Amazon and plug it into my laptop and then I have 1 million subscribers? No, it doesn't work that way. You have to put a lot into it. The rewards are fantastic. The emotional side, right? The philosophical side, the bliss side, all of that. That comes back to you, but you have to give first, and that's it. That's so, like I said, that's philosophical and that's strong. That is. But it's also just the way, it's like entropy, man. It's just
it is. It's fundamental. And another thing to consider too is you have to make sacrifices in that, following your passion. And so many times people are looking for sort of a vicarious salvation. They're looking for I think of it as like the American Idol moment where we think one day we'll be discovered. It's like, you're not going to get discovered. You have to get out there and do something. No one's going to come in and swoop you up and see how special you are. And that's hard for people to hear.
Nobody gives a crap about you.
There's many special people. You got to get out there and get to it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. I mean, what are you going to go stand in front of iHeartRadio with a picket sign, hire me? Right? It's not how it works, man. It's not how it works. But this is a great segue though, because you're educated, you have, you're the complete package as far as education and knowledge and drive and research. You have all of that going for you, but you've chosen a subject that is the difficult one. And looking at you and listening, it seems like that will be the last subject on your list, which is the taboo, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you don't mess around. Here's the umbrella, right? Everything hanging off of it, dripping off of it that you're not supposed to touch and get you wet. That's what you write about. Right.
Yeah, you can put it that way. So, that's so. I will say we did talk a little philosophically and maybe inspirationally, but I want to point out too, and it may sound like easy for us in this position to say, oh, you just got to get it, hustle, whatever. But one of the reasons, maybe the reason I got into this was because I understand how hard it is, to think, well, maybe I want to do something, but I really don't have the tools or whatever. So it does sound simplified when somebody in a different position is out there saying, oh no, you just got to do this. It's like, well, easy for you to say, right? But I will say, I ran away from home at 15 and dropped out of school. So I'm a high school dropout. So I'm very educated for a high school dropout. And I left and didn't look back, which sounds great. And it was really bad too at the same time, as you could imagine. So I traveled the country. I lived in my car, had all sorts of misadventures. I sort of had a spiritual quest where I went to all kinds of different churches and synagogues and temples. And I you name it, I was looking for answers because my background was not quite, it was terrible. It was absolutely wretched. So all of that trauma and everything led me to leave. Well, it gets lonely when you live in your car, because I did end up getting a car and driving around, and it gets lonely. And this was back before, I had the internet, but it was like MapQuest, where I printed off a map, like this is where I'm going, and so it was a different time, of course. And it gets lonely. And something that really kept me going was late night radio. I would listen to Art Bell and all of that. And I found myself once in the desert, of all places, because why not? A teenager, like, who will find me, right? Do not do this. If you're a teenager, do not go out. No, bad advice. However, I did it. And I remember lying on the hood of my old car, and the sky was just huge, it's just absolutely huge out there. And I'm listening to some episode, and just, I thought in that moment, how awesome it would be, not to at all be on the show or anything like that, but just to be in a position where you could have access to people who are interesting and would want to talk about those types of subjects and have that freedom of inquiry. And that sort of thing just kept my mind working, so when I'm in survival mode, I had that to fall back on to keep me sort of interested and engaged and to keep my mind off of things. So it was quite a distraction. I didn't go from that to, it was a long way. And I didn't think about it. I didn't make it some kind of goal, but I did always think, how cool would it be to just be in that position? And so I, had many more misadventures to come and a lot of different things. And as you could imagine, somebody with a no high school diploma, not even a GED, trying to make it in their, at this point, then early 20s, not looking good. So of course I go back to school and I do the right thing and I start studying things like business and, whatever. But I ended up going in the direction that made sense for me because of wonderful professors who encouraged me to follow my bliss, follow my passion. And that's what I did. And, lo and behold, one day I end up on Coast to Coast and I had that moment where I'm like, wow, it wasn't really the goal. The goal was to have discussions, to talk to interesting people. And
Did
so here I am.
we did Coast, right? Didn't you and I do Coast together?
We
Was I
did,
the
didn't
host?
we? Yeah,
I
yeah.
was the host. Now,
Okay.
yeah. How
I've
how
gone a
trippy
couple of
is that?
times. Isn't that trippy? So
Yeah, it is, and but here's let's go back to Joseph Campbell for a second. Your life is like reading the pages of Joseph Campbell. But if you really think about it, and you don't even know who he is at the time, when you're young.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's you are the hero's journey if you think about it.
I do think of it, and it's something that led me to study that in great depth. I went into, Jungian psychology and this sort of thing because I was interested in ancient texts, and what you see are those patterns in ancient texts. So you do see the monomyth. You do see that we're telling the same story over and over again, and it's like, why? What is that cross culturally, and cross languages, and is it something? To me, people will say myths are, okay, mythology. When you say myths, it sounds like they're not true, right? I mean, and so for me, mythology is actually true. Okay, so it's not necessarily factual. Mythology can seem irrational because, well, crazy things happen in it that don't seem very rational, but it doesn't inherently make it irrational. It makes it pre-rational. Myth occupies a very special place in the minds of people. It's pre-rational insofar as that it's the the origin of symbols and dreams and this sort of thing. And so it comes out of that part of the brain, then it gets rationalized. So it carries fundamental truths that, while not factual and also change depending on the time and culture, there's definitely value to myths. And I think we're all living in sort of that monomyth. It sounds a little, again, we're, waxing philosophical tonight, but I think it's important to point that out, that we all are heroes, and heroes sound really big. Like now we have superheroes, and I'm really against, believe it or I'm really against superheroes. I don't like superheroes. I mean, it may be fun, but the origin of the superhero is an interesting one too. It actually comes from the Ubermensch. Maybe, people are familiar with the concept.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
The origin of Superman was actually in the very beginning. So it comes from this idea of Nietzsche's philosophy. We've all heard of the quote that he was famous for, God is dead. Usually people end it there because it sort of sounds like a celebratory statement, like, hooray, he's gone, but he really wasn't meaning it that way. He went on to say, God is dead. We have killed him. Who are we, murderers of all murderers? And then he laments, who's going to wipe the blood off of our hands? Who's going to invent new games of atonement? But in the end, after his lament, he goes on to say, are we to become gods, if only to appear worthy of it? So right there, he introduces this idea of transcendence and transhumanism. He doesn't say, hey, we have to become gods now because we killed God, but he puts that out there as a nugget, like, that idea got people so excited over this idea that we were kind of going someplace, that there were three positions. One, this if you think about 2001: A Space Odyssey, that opening scene, that actually was inspired. All of that is connected to that Nietzsche's quote that comes out of a book that he wrote that inspired Strauss to write that song, that dun, 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 the one that opens. And then, of course, Kubrick, being a genius, pulled all that together and showed that for his work. But if you look at Animal Man and then humans, and then we were supposed to transcend that and become the Ubermensch. Well, that inspired a lot of people and a lot of different ideas. And it inspired two young 18-year-old guys from Cleveland, Ohio, where I am, to write Superman based off the Ubermensch. Well, initially, and they were kids that were going through the Depression, and they were literally doing this as a side hustle. So they made this. You can look it up online, and it's really cool to see the original iteration of it. But it didn't go over very well because Superman, as the Ubermensch, had telepathic abilities, and he was unstoppable. So it makes it kind of not so interesting. And then they also saw that this philosophy was starting to take hold, and they were Jewish, and so they looked at the situation and thought, oh, we don't want to contribute to this narrative, and maybe we could do something to fight it. And so they literally went back to the drawing board, and they rewrote Superman to be more reflective of who they felt they were, maybe outsiders. They gave him an Achilles heel. So
you gotta have that. Well, you see, that, and I've just cut you off, but you have to. It's weak storytelling if your superhero can do anything. Then what's the purpose of the story? What's the purpose of the story?
It's a god. It's a god. Right. You've made you instead of a hero, and that's an important thing. So, in the idea of the hero comes out of the Greek tradition, where they, if you think about, so the ancient gods like the Sumerians had, and all of this, they were very much oppressive, abusive. They were terrible, really. They also weren't very good. You wouldn't walk around wearing like a "what would Zeus do" bracelet. I mean, because Zeus was raping people. He was like drunk. Everybody was just like a mess. And so the idea of like morality and the gods, it wasn't quite a thing back then. So it was a very oppressive state. The Greeks sort of started to figure out, we need another step in between this to be inspired. We need something to aspire to be. And so they kind of came up with this idea of the hero, and it came out of their local tradition. So the way it went would be, and there are many heroes, little hero cults everywhere. And so what they would do is, say, for instance, in your hometown, you have like a burning building. There's a bunch of kids in a school, and the building's burning, and the fire department comes, and you got like Bob, the fireman, and he comes in and saves the children, comes out with like 3 of them, and he's holding them, and hooray, So we have local heroes. Well, in that sense, if we were like the Greeks, what we would have done is we would make a monument to Bob the fireman. There would have been a group of females who would have just devoted their life to his memory. They would have, had decorating his grave. They would have had his body interned in a secret place, made like a little cult around it. And then, of course, it would have gone from, well, he saved 3 kids from a burning building to, well, he flew out of there. It kind of got, mythologized as it would. And all of these had, their own local Greek hero. So what it did is it gave people something to aspire to, because trying to be a god is really daunting. But
it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah,
it's a hard job.
It's a hard one. Yeah. So if you think, well, there's a rung in the ladder that maybe I can achieve where I'm a little better than human, not quite a god, but somewhere in between, that's been a very enticing, view for people. And so, of course, if you have an Ubermensch type situation, it can be interesting to people who want to become gods. And then those are generally the people who, maybe want to take advantage of that system. So yeah, the hero is something that it's a very important part of that mythic quest, I think, that we're all on. And what it looks like to be a hero isn't something so big like the movies. You can be a hero every day if you wake up to your alarm clock and get up and go to work, because part of what Joseph Campbell talked about on the hero's journey was the steps to being a hero. And what the hero was it's a process of mastery and transformation. So you go from the known world, and then you get the call to adventure. That call could be something like the alarm goes off and it's like, oh, okay. And then you have to refuse the call. That's another step. And then after your reluctance to maybe get out of bed and hustle, you have a mentor, you have something come to you that says, no, you got to cross the threshold and go into the unknown world and take on the adventures. And you can, extrapolate that out to something huge. Like maybe you're looking for an opportunity and the phone rings and somebody's offering an opportunity to go somewhere, get on a plane. It can be a host of things, but it does seem to go through these weird and interesting cycles that are endlessly fascinating to me because they're shared cross-culturally. Except for
it's so funny how once you read Joseph Campbell, and by the way, I went through a bad Nietzsche phase. I went through a bad. It was bad.
Yeah,
and it's funny because when I read him now, I don't take it as serious. Right. It was like biblical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. It was like crazy. Yeah. But what a weird word to use in describing him. But anyway, I don't, it's weird how, anyway, because I was obsessed. Still am, but I don't take it quite as serious. But anyway, when you look at the hero's journey, and the concepts behind it, and you can go down the checklist, right? And any of the good works, the great works that predated Joseph Campbell's modern. Week. And he's last week. I mean, he is like, he's part of us in our generation. So when you look at the great work, the ones that have transcended time and that have held up, it's the hero's journey. And It doesn't matter what it's about or what it is, and it can even be nonfiction. It doesn't even have to be fiction.
It can be. It doesn't have to be literature. It can be music. Music has.
It could be music. Right. So any of that is the hero's journey. It took Joseph Campbell to put it into words, right, and give us that checklist. And then, boom, it's there. Now it's required reading for anybody that is getting into screenwriting or filmmaking or storytelling or writing or whatever it may be. Joseph Campbell is required now, and it's fascinating how that has happened. Now, but to that end, oh, by the way, thus spoke Zarathustra. Yeah, that's what it was. That's what it just popped in my head.
That's very, very, very good work. um, to say the least. It's very, that's his writing is so important and so interesting because it can be taken so many different ways. So you really have to study it, like mull it over, and go line by line, which is what makes it brilliant. Little mad, but brilliant. So
Well, so in your hero's journey to jump into today, it's easier if you want to talk about these subjects, aliens and
mhm.
ET and life
It
out
is much
there.
easier now. Yeah.
It's much easier now, but you chose that path before things started to open up these last few years. Do you find it easier? Can you just now have freedom of thought and just go into that research without fear and just reckless abandon and go into this and not worry about?
It's different. I can't be reckless. Now it comes with a whole new set of challenges. But I will say that somebody who helped encourage me, is Michael Cremo, author of Forbidden Archaeology. I was very interested in his work. I didn't realize that he was considered fringe, believe it or not. I didn't realize some of that in the beginning, and I took an archaeology class, and I've told this story before, but they had written on the board some names of pseudo archaeologists and some of their theories. And this was like the first week or something where we had to pick one of those, and it was going to be the thing we like debunked and all of that. And I thought, before we even know anything, like, I'm just a student, I don't know anything. So I recognized some of the names, and I just, that stuck with me. Like, it just made it more taboo. Oh yeah, I was raised Catholic, and so we were told, don't watch The Exorcist. So of course I'm going to watch The Exorcist. So if I go to the college and they're like, here are these like villainous archaeologists, I'm like, well, that's my reading list. And so I wanted to see what it was all about. So I ended up getting involved in archaeology at that level, and working in it and this sort of thing. And I found that it was just, I was having a lot of issues with the corruption of it all, and feeling like I was going nowhere interest wise, and it was just just not a good vibe. So I ended up reaching out to Michael Cremo, and I was like, do you think I should just like say forget it and go out and just write books or something? And he emailed me back, and to his credit, he was basically like, be cool, stay in school, kid. He said if I wanted to go and do something, different, I could, and I could talk about whatever I wanted, and it would be just, sky's the limit. But if I stayed in academia, I could sort of push the envelope a little bit and maybe make some progress. But he ultimately said it would be better to, gain the background, gain the understanding, so that I could have a different lens to maybe help legitimize some of these topics. And I thought, well, that makes sense. Thanks. And just the fact that he emailed me back again, I'm coming from a situation where I was once literally homeless, and I'm going now at this point to a community college. And so, I was just like climbing my way. I didn't think anyone would even respond if I wrote a letter. And so just the fact that he reached out to me and had that little bit of a conversation was enough for me to just say, I'm gonna go in and see what they have to say, and I'm gonna follow my interests as well. And it doesn't have to be either or. And that's what I learned too, is it's not either or. How many things, you've been in this a long time, how much, I mean, I don't even have to ask you how many off the wall things you've heard that are outright lies, but then how many off the wall things that you've heard that are absolutely 100% true. You have to be able to have a framework to kind of sort through it all, and you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. You can't just say, well, this sounds crazy, so it is crazy. It's like, well, a lot of things sounded crazy and until they weren't. I mean, for a long time, they've argued that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens never interbred. I mean, there are people who still say this, and I'm like, there's evidence. It's preposterous. So once I got in it a little bit more, I thought, oh, I see. This is just a house of cards, and it's about to fall down. So there are definitely still tools that are necessary, especially coming from, a background where I wasn't an academic, and then picking up those tools, taking those tools and applying them into an arena that was far more interesting, and I thought needed a serious look. Because, if you relegate everything to the realm of just fringe and entertainment, well, it's fun. The work doesn't actually get done. And then it puts it at risk for being just cast aside. So when you do have those outlandish claims, but that are actually true, what happens? They just get kicked aside. So I thought I need to go out and make a serious go of this. And that's sort of been, I guess, the keynote of what I've tried to do is take these topics and really look at them in a serious way. Again, back to Nietzsche, the poster on X-Files that everybody knows, which is I want to believe. The
I have
Nietzsche,
it right there. I have it.
I mean,
It's hanging right there. Yep.
it's so cool. Well, Nietzsche, I'll quote Nietzsche. He said, there are two different types of people in the world, those who want to know and those who want to believe. And it's fun. I'm sure there's a lot of people who want to believe, but I actually want to know. So, and to know things, you have to be very open, but you also have to be discerning. And I mean, that in and of itself is a challenge. And so it gives me plenty of things to do to occupy my time.
See, the archaeologist, or even you could even say physicist, and we can go in that direction too as well. But also, anthropology and stuff. When you go through the system and you get your diploma, let's just say that you've got some capital letters next to your name, and you go out and you're there with your brush, or you're there in a library, whatever it is, right? But you're doing your thing, but you have to stay on the road. You're not allowed to drive off the road. But if you're out there with your brush and you're brushing something off, and you're digging down deep, and you're like, wait, what? And then somebody comes over your shoulder and says, "That's not what you think it is."
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
That's what Michael Cremo is giving you advice on. You
Yeah.
need to have I don't swear on this show. Okay, I don't. But so I'm going to say a bad word.
Uh-oh.
You have to learn the bullshit
Yes.
that they are teaching you.
Yes.
So when you go out and write about these subjects, you can say, "Yeah, I know, but I know what I'm talking about here." And you need to have that to back you up. And that's what's very, very impressive. And you can't, there's so many today. I'm going back to Egypt in a couple of months. This will be my third trip in 3 years. And the Egyptologists out there still they're still on the road, but they are totally different than they were 20 years ago. Right.
Yeah.
And they are opening up. Things are a little bit. And why? It's because they see stuff every day. They're learning stuff every day. And they know, man. They know that.
They see stuff, and there's a changing of the guard. Because you mentioned, is it easier now? And I would say back when I first started doing this, it was not that easy. It was what it was. You knew going in that you're just going to wreck your reputation but the good thing is I didn't care, because I didn't try to have a reputation. I wasn't really going in that direction. I knew sort of what I wanted to do, and so I was ready to just be called whatever name, a pseudo-archaeologist and all that, so whatever. But I did that, and it was interesting, and I've seen over the years the landscape change completely, and it's great on one hand, but then also, again, it poses a new set of problems. So in my classes, when I'm teaching, when I was teaching, I would ask students sometimes, how many have heard of the Sumerians? And nobody. And I'd say, oh, okay, well, I get it. There's reasons for that. How about the Egyptians? We've all heard of the Egyptians, right? King Tut, and they'd look at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, King Tut, maybe two of them would raise their hand. And I'm thinking, what bizarro world am I in that these students don't even know that, or maybe they're not engaged? And so, but then over time, I started noticing they had more of an interest, particularly in the Sumerians. And then a lot of that came from the show Ancient Aliens. And so I've seen over the years a huge interest in this material. Now, when I was working in the field, I was responsible for a little project we did at Archaeology Day at the museum. And I was making like print collateral, and I was supposed to get everybody excited for the archaeology program and this. So I made these flyers that had a skull and, kind of like spooky things. And I thought it was cool, and I got a lot of people interested in it. And I was reprimanded by the department chair, and they were like, what are you doing? It makes it look like a mockery. And we're the very anti-Indiana Jones-esque, thing going on, because they thought that it would just send a wrong message. And I get it. But the thing is, shows like Ancient Aliens, and of course you could pick it apart all day and you could, say what you will about it. And in the beginning, of course, people looked at that show like, what is this? These people are crazy. And now you can see legitimate people are on there. Irving Finkel was just on there,
Yep.
from the British Museum. People are realizing that finally, the thing I've been trying to say, which is you can't shy away from this and act just above it. You have to go in and meet people where they are. And there's nothing wrong with getting people interested in alternative ideas, because that's the gateway into discernment, critical thinking, trying to figure these things out. It's okay to be interesting and exciting. But one thing that they did at the American Anthropological Association, this was when I just stopped paying my dues and I just dropped out of that. Some years ago, they had a conference where they actually discussed how they would go about handling the Ancient Alien television show and all of those things. And what they determined in this conference, in this meeting, and then the meeting minutes are up and you can find it online. They said that what they were going to do is they realized that their method before was not working, to just ignore it or try to debunk it here and there, but ultimately ignore it. What they ended up saying that they would do now proactively is to say anything Ancient Aliens oriented, we would now call racist. And the reason they said that is because they said that, well, it's basically, and I understand this. This is not even something that is completely, off the wall. So they said that, well, when you say something as simple as the aliens built the pyramids, you're discrediting and discounting the achievements of the humans that live there. And those humans that live there happen to be, of a different race, perhaps, whatever that may be. And so therefore it could be racist. They also tied it to Nazi ideology because of the background of things like Atlantis, a lot of, I'm sure the audience knows about the assorted occulted history of, the Nazis and their interest in things like Atlantis. And so they said, aha, another way we can say it's, subversive and racist and all of this dangerous ideology. So they all kind of got together, pulled out a couple things, and they said, from now on, the official stance of the American Anthropological Association in response to shows like Ancient Aliens and all of this pseudo-archaeology is to say that it's dangerous and that it is basically like Nazi stuff, and so that's where they're at with it now.
Yeah, and all of that ultimately, and they have been attempting that, by the way. It's been done, and the attacks have been there. But people are smart, and we're getting smarter. Yeah. The reason why you and I are sitting here right now is because of Galileo. Somebody that's thinking outside of the box, going against the dogma, heresy, and he could have been executed. He gave up his life because of the data and what, and he stuck to his guns. And people like him, right, is thinking outside of the box. Just what if? That's why Isaac Newton was so great, right? You think outside of the box and then go and chase that down and see if you may not find something, right? But at least you're thinking that way. Today, when you're all confined, this is where, especially with anthropology, where they've got it all wrong. We're smarter today than we were back then. And we have access to information. And this is the information we have access to. This is the interesting part of this. This is where you're telling me that Stone Age man came wandering out of the desert at 3000 BC and then went straight from Nabda Playa, right? Came over to the Giza Plateau, chopped the hill off, leveled it. Stone Age man, right? No education, no knowledge, no engineering, nothing. There's nothing there. And whacked off this hilltop and built two pyramids at the same time, Khafre and Khufu. Those are the modern names of the and orientated them perfectly level to true north. Now, wait a minute. Let's stop right there for a second. And allegedly at 5000 BC, if you went to a modern home builder today, and you're in a subdivision, and you buy your plot of land, and you go to your construction company, go, okay, now check this out. I need this house perfectly level. Not only that, but I want it true north. Why? Why would you do that? Do you know how expensive? No, I don't think we can. And so lasers and levels and this and then and what you would put an engineering company through to achieve those things, but yet you're telling me that Stone Age man could, but today we have to overcome the obstacles to do that. Now, I'm not saying it was aliens, but there's something else involved here that you're not discussing with us. And that's where humanity is today. They realize, Heather, they just realize. It's like, man,
it just doesn't make sense. Right,
no,
right.
Right.
Something doesn't add up.
Yeah. So they can, American Geological Society, anthropology, astronomical, I don't care who you pick. All of those professional associations, they've got a lot of stuff to overcome today. That's because people are educating themselves and they have access to this. Okay. Now we got to get into xenoarchaeology, and somehow I'm gonna swing it that way. But we all have those three fundamental questions. Who are we? What happens after we die? And are we alone in the universe? Those are the three big ones. And everybody, there's 8 billion people on this planet all thinking those three right there. And so you can be any professional organization you want. You're not going to change the mindset of those 8 billion people asking those three fundamental questions. We want to know, and we're going to get to those answers, aren't we?
I think so. I think we're on our way. And I think that, all of what used to be alternative media, when I started looking into this stuff, it was very subversive. It was very alternative. Now it is coming to be the media. And sometimes people don't want to think that. They don't want to admit that if they're in the old guard. But if you look at things like YouTube views and, Nielsen ratings, added up, you're going to get more views on YouTube than you are on a lot of different networks, with the exception of some particular television shows here and there. But we have a democratization now and access to, get this information out there, at least for the time being. And I think that's why it comes under attack a lot, is because they've lost control of the narrative. So it's important to, again, it's swinging, I think, it could swing in a different way. I've seen a lot of changes over the years where, yes, people are becoming more open to this, but at the same time, I've seen things where it's now gotten so far out of reach in terms of unbelievable things that are not at all backed. And so, it can overcorrect and so that's difficult. And so there's a lot of weird theories and things that, don't align anymore with reality. But, even that could be investigated, because if it isn't something factual, it could be something phenomenological, like, well, what is this person experiencing and why? So I think it's just, humans are curious. And if we remain curious, I think that's the important thing. And that's how we'll get, it's like proto-science. You mentioned Newton, Newtonian physics. How materialist is that? Well, he came out of trying to, figure out the end of the world. His whole, collection of manuscripts were all about the occult and alchemy and all sorts of different esoteric ventures. And we happen to forget that and just call him, the father of science. It's like, it starts with the courage to think differently. You have to think differently, entertain the thoughts, and then put it through the scientific method. It will filter out, as you said, the BS. But first we have to be creative. And people sometimes don't like that line of thinking because it's like
he got his math, the ideas about gravity and the thoughts about that worked its way into math and algorithms that we still use today came from being a religious scholar, studying alchemy. Talk about waxing philosophical. That did, right? And so that's why. And today with science, we just don't. It's like that's 300 years ago, right? 350 years ago. How much amnesia do you need to have? It's okay to talk about and wonder about consciousness and still be an astrophysicist. You can do both.
Yeah.
You know, and the AAS, the American Astronomical Society, did this press release last month about your book. I swear to God, it was about your book, which was this. They said, okay, we have to have protocols in place for the moment that an astronomer observes alien technology in the deep universe for the first time. They're going to go through trauma. So we need to have this put in place. And I'm thinking to myself, what is it that they know? Right? Why is this coming out? Right? It's inevitable. We're looking deeper and deeper into this, and it's something is going to be seen, and we need to be prepared for the astronomer that's, look and for that moment. Well, that's what we do. We want answers. We're looking deeper, and we're looking for that, it's not only exoplanets, but we're looking for technosignatures. We're looking for any that. That's the professional side. The woo-woo side, us, we've got all. I've seen the crazy. I've looked in the sky and went, whoa! All right, so I've had my moments. I don't need to be an astronomer looking in a radio telescope or looking at data at an exoplanet and have my mind blown. I already know, we just need to keep doing that. But science is going in that direction. And Heather, ET is doing the same thing. They're looking for us. Right?
Well, I think that part of the overall if there is a grand scheme behind all of this, I think that there at least is a benefit to keeping people mired in either one viewpoint, like a scientific materialist viewpoint, and then another, as you say, woo. Because if imagine what would happen if you took the tools of the science and you applied them at the so-called woo, and you brought that together and really started taking a serious look at some of these phenomena, and then, let science actually work, not the religion of science, but the method of science. I think we start answering big questions, and I think that is what they're afraid of. I really do. I think that's why there's a concerted effort to keep people who are deep into the throes of just science, saying, things like ancient aliens are just, wacky and maybe even dangerous. So maybe we shouldn't even allow people to see it. And then also on the other side, you'll have people who are like, it's just all entertainment. This is a lot of fun. We're not taking it seriously. In fact, let's just start really just making things up and whatever. And so that benefits only, those who don't want to know the truth and those who just want to believe in either science or believe in woo. And so I think we'll be more powerful if we kind of take the tools of science and the things that we've been given through our inheritance of all the great empirical researchers before us, and apply those things to the real phenomenon. Like the people who look up and they see something, don't discount that, investigate. And if you trust in science, as you say, trust the science, that's what we hear now, then trust that it'll do its job. Don't be afraid. Have the information.
That's why Avi Loeb is doing what he's doing.
Yes.
And I've read his books. I've hung out with him. I've had dinner with him. He's been on my TV show. He's been on Fade to Black a bunch of times. And the more that I look at Avi and his approach to it, he did like a sneaky end around. I think he grew up asking the big questions, but he took an academic path, one that he's one of the smartest people on the planet for sure, right? But one that put him into these institutions of that allowed him to achieve the credibility, right? So he's there, he's solid, right? Everything is good, and then he goes, whoop. Okay, what about right?
Right.
And he did the end around. He did a sneak attack, right? And now when you read his book on Oumuamua, Extraterrestrial, when you read that book, and I've read it dozens of times,
It's a fantastic book.
it's an amazing book, and he says it over, and it's like on every page. He keeps going back. It's the data that I'm following here. It's the data that is being ignored by the rest of the world. It's the data. This is what the data says. And he says it like on every single page. He keeps running that home. And that we need the science to look at the data. That's all we need to do here. There's a phenomenon going on. Don't ignore it. Apply some scientific data. That's all you have to do.
Yeah,
So, and I think I think we're getting closer with that.
I
So,
think
what
so.
is,
I think they're-
before we get to the break, what's your definition for xenoarchaeology?
Well, xenoarchaeology, it's different than, say, there's such a thing called space archaeology, and space archaeology is, it used to be an idea that, we do archaeology in space, but over time, we actually, as humans, have left debris and materials and cultural artifacts in space. And so the actual field of space archaeology deals with that. So looking at things left on the moon or space junk and that sort of thing. And so then you have xenoarchaeology. And xenoarchaeology, xeno coming from, the Greek meaning other or alien or stranger, and of course archaeology. So xenoarchaeology is the study of alien artifacts. So, it's something that can be done on Earth, and it's something that can be done out of our realm of Earth. And those are the things I sort of address in the book, is the feasibility of the quest of xenoarchaeology. I wanted to look at this in a more legitimate way, so kind of what we're talking about. There are efforts to research, interstellar objects, as you mentioned, the Oumuamua, and there's all sorts of things going down, but it's really siloed. It's kind of, I'm not going to go so far as to say it's all secret, but there are secret aspects to it. There are other things that are just, conveniently disjointed and, not put together. But there have been calls for legitimate xenoarchaeological guidelines. There was a paper that was put out in 2010 by a professor in Las Vegas, and his paper called for there to be an establishment of actual guidelines, methodologies, policies, and socio-political considerations and that sort of thing. And then it just, so there is some stuff going on in the background. And again, it's pushed to one side and the other. So you have that, and then you have this huge cultural increase in interest in things like ancient aliens. And so we hear the terms ancient astronaut theorists. We hear ancient aliens, and most people are starting to know that, and it's great. But how can we maybe legitimize that conquest, paleo contact, that sort of thing, under one research methodology? And that would be xenoarchaeology. So it's not something I made up, but it is something that I've pulled from the depths of actual academia and what they're doing to achieve those things. So yeah, there could be xenoarchaeologists in the future, hopefully.
I believe so too. I hear it mentioned more and more. I mean, we went from zero mentions of it to now in professional circles. I've heard it dropped, and I was like, man, this is just so cool. And I think that the reason for that is where we are today, Heather, when it comes to numbers, we're at a different place. Even 20 years ago, the numbers, the size, the speed of the universe, the amount of stars and galaxies and planets, and it's a numbers game. The numbers have gotten so huge that even if you're data driven, even if you're a non-spiritual atheist, chemically driven, numbers driven scientist, that you can't ignore what the numbers are. You can be driven by numbers, and that's fine. You can make your decisions every day about your life about numbers and not drive emotion into it or spirituality. That's okay. But the more that you look at this, you cannot deny that the numbers are too great. There is not only life out there, there's, man, I almost said a bad word. There's a blank ton of it out there. A lot. I mean, maybe infinite. I was reading, I'm in the middle of one of Stephen Hawking's books right now. And he mentions in there a few times the infinite universe, that it's not finite, and the possibility, right, of an infinite universe. Now he talks about the multiverse and those concepts and where it comes from. But isn't that interesting? That's the kind of numbers game that we're dealing with. So xenoarchaeology is something that has to be put into play. That is an aspect of where we are right now. It's just things are too big.
Yeah, it has to be dealt with responsibly. It can't just be in the realm of, it is a word that actually came out of science fiction. And so it can't just stay in the realm of science fiction, and it needs to be something that is honed and applied, because even though we're not able to go off world yet in the ways that it would take to do that type of heavy duty research, there's a lot of things that we can do with the technology that we have. There's a lot of things that whether or not we can do it, we have to start planning now. Like you said, getting people prepared for what happens when we get the disclosure. We're getting soft disclosure. We get disclosure here. What are they stopping themselves from? Like, why aren't we allowed to know these things? It's we can't handle it. Is that what it is? I mean, maybe some of it is, for our own good, as they say. But even NASA, I forget what year it was. I think 2021. They said, the news report said they hired 24 theologians to work with them to figure out what would happen if we discovered extraterrestrial life, and how could we deal with that theologically, because it would rattle the beliefs of the world religions. They actually backtracked that a little bit because it got so much press, and they wanted to clarify, and they put out a statement that said, no, we didn't hire 24 theologians. We gave a grant to 24 theologians from the Center for Theological Inquiry, the Center for Theological Inquiry. So they funded that research, but they didn't want to claim it because, just too much attention. So they are doing this work. They're doing a lot more too. So we need to know. We need to know about it.
You know what would freak people out? The questions about aliens and ET contact, I don't think there's absolutely zero issues with that. People expect it. They expect it. They expect, man. That's, what would freak people out? If Atlantis was real, right? Or if there was a civilization, there was an ancient civilization 1 million years ago that came and went. And that
would freak people out.
They would lose their minds. I would.
Yeah, I would. Because it kind of makes you question then your own mortality and your own idea of progress. Like, because if there was an Atlantis, which, Plato said there was Atlantis. I mean, it was described differently, of course, but, it's safe to say, in my view, that there was a place like Atlantis. Now, how far out it goes based on people's channeling information. And, somebody, I don't know if you've had him on the show, but Michael LaFlemme, he wrote a really great book called Visions of Atlantis that kind of covered all of this. And so there is this point where it's like there's a historical, maybe pathway for Atlantis to be real. And then it gets a little muddy with some of the channeling and different things. But then, of course, Edgar Casey's information, that's that's a little different. And so it's a whole thing that I think that in that regard, yes, if people found out there was an Atlantis, it would be very troubling because they've been taught to believe that it's just like fish people, like Aquaman or something, you know.
That's what would offend. See, but that's exactly it. That's what would offend everybody.
Yeah.
How long have you known this, and why did you teach us something else?
Yes, I know. That's exactly right. Like, because we know things. And yet when you say Atlantis to, say, if I have a group of students and I say Atlantis, they think, Aquaman. I'm like, well, wait, let me tell you the truth here. And it's like, why weren't we told the truth? It's like, none of us were told the truth. We're not told. And that makes people mad. It's like the Sumerians. I talk about all the time when people are surprised that we've known about the Sumerians, since the mid 1800s, late 1800s, and translating things since like 1920s. But like, why is it now a newer thing in people's minds? It's like, well, that was by design. That was literally by design. They'd had discussions about that because they didn't want to, when they found that the Sumerian records pushed back some of the biblical stories, like by thousands of years, they said, well, the public doesn't need to know about this because it would make them not so, dutifully Christian. And so we'll just keep it under wraps. So they didn't hide it per se. It was like lying by omission. They didn't go out and tell it to everybody, and they made it a very exclusive field. And so it's, par for the course. There's a lot of things we've not been told, and we're continuing to not be told.
That's right. And the danger with disclosure, it's not what people think. Not only our community, but the painting of it by officials or groups or reports. I don't care if it's the Rand Corporation or the Condon Report, or whatever. Those blanket statements about the dangers of it, they don't apply. But the reason why they say that is because if that moment happens that is out of their control, whatever it is, right? Something crazy happens over Los Angeles, something goes down, the people of the world are going to go, how long have you known about this?
Yes.
So
Civil
wait a minute
unrest.
here. Right. How long so the tinfoil hat crazy conspiracy crowd that you made jokes about was actually telling the truth? So what is it, and how long have you held this from us? Because it's nature. You're holding nature from us. This is knowledge that is how should I cannot be restricted. You can't. It's the universe. What are you talking about? This is nature. This is just life, and you're holding that from us. That's not right. We have, again, I'm going to say, we have the rights to that knowledge. You're not the keepers of everything, and it's like 1984 coming true, and controlling of information, which has gone on for millennia.
Yeah, unfortunately it has, and it will continue unless we do something about it.
Well, let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Dr. Heather Lynn, and her new book, which I'm going to get to after we come back from the break, is all about xenoarchaeology and the search for lost civilizations out there in the heavens. Oh, that should be the title of the book. You're supposed to laugh.
It has a title, so I mean, maybe it could be the follow-up.
We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now.
My job is not to preach. My job is to take you on this journey.
In a state of passion, nothing negative can happen. that it's the moons of those planets that would have life.
Sometimes I see, these energies also in your field.
It is our passion and our pleasure.
Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. And right now, if you get a Game Changer membership for a limited time, you will get Fade to Black blend coffee with your Game Changer membership. That's right. We have 2 t-shirts. We have the original, the classic Fade to Black t-shirt. You know you want one. Post a picture. Send it to us. We'll put it in our Fade to Black gallery. And we've got the new official Fade to Black t-shirt drawn by Michael Oming. 2 t-shirts, 2 ways to get them. Get yours today. Everything is in stock. Everything gets autographed. Everything includes shipping. And you're going to get a tracking number. And with a Game Changer membership, you get an email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads of the show. Those are uploaded every single night after the show to the website. So don't delay. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right, welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Sometimes I'm just a little slow on the mouse. Our guest tonight, Dr. Heather Lynn, and her new book that is coming out. It's called The Final Frontier: Xenoarchaeology and the Interplanetary Search for Lost Civilizations. And I want to get straight back to it. Heather, are we doing it the official ways that we are searching for life right now? Are we doing it the right way?
I mean, I would say there's a lot of people doing a lot of right things. I mean, even NASA, I mean, as far as they can go, they're having efforts. They're doing a lot of things. There's a lot of people doing things. The problem is, in my view, that there are so many people doing so many different things, and they're just all over the place. And there's not this cohesive effort. The larger efforts are being done, and again, secrecy. I'm not going to say it's secret because you can look on the websites and pull up the information. So it's like hidden in plain sight. It's just not one of those things that people are going out and overtly marketing that they're doing and getting the people engaged with and involved in doing so. And I think that, whether it's intentional or not, the consequence of that is that you'll have, potential students and, people who could contribute into an up and coming field who don't. And by excluding people, you're making it an exclusive study. And that then has all kinds of problems because who owns it then? And that's something that there's a rabbit hole that I've gone down that I'm just, it's one of the follow the money as usual. And so that was something that was disturbing to me. I included in the book a little bit. So for instance, something like the tools that we're using, we have all kinds of satellites and, we're looking for all kinds of different things out there. So we know this. So these are things that are being used currently. It's not, a secret or a mystery. But there are other aspects to this that go beyond, like you said, like the astronomy of it. There are the social implications, the theological implications, and it's more of a multidisciplinary approach that's needed. And it's not really having that in such a way that it's cohesive and productive and public knowledge. And so there's people doing things, all over the place. So to give you an example of this, there's, the use of AI is huge. Everybody's interested in it, and not just things like the chat GPTs and whatnot, but just any form of AI. It's just the hottest thing right now. And so you could think, well, what would be the role of AI in something like xenoarchaeology? And there's a huge role for it, which could be exciting and potentially offer all kinds of different, avenues for research. And, especially considering that xenoarchaeology is currently very limited because we're not able to go, on to these other planets and say dig or this sort of thing. So there's a lot of steps in between us being able to go and have boots on the ground and, what we're doing now. And so it's all up and coming. In the meantime, there was a story that came out, like this past year, I think it was, an announcement that they have been using artificial intelligence to decipher Sumerian texts. And it's like, oh, isn't that kind of cool, right? And so if you look, though, a little more closely about that story, at first glance, you might think, wow, I'm sure it's just, a college and these grad students, and they think, oh, we're going to use like, a large language model or something to, do this like research study, blah, blah, blah. But no, what's going on there is limited access to this information. I mean, there is some public access to it, but it's not just one university. There's more universities. But when you follow where they're getting the funding for doing this, it's coming from one location, one global institution called the Transatlantic Platform. And so it's one of these situations where you have this big organization and then they put the grants out to smaller organizations that are still large. So like all of the main bodies governing our grant money and sciences and all of the different countries have signed on to this Transatlantic Platform. That's where they get their money. And so at this little university level, they're getting their grant funding from this global organization. When you look at who's involved in this global organization, it goes back to, people with these deep pockets and deep influence that go beyond, just simple politicians. These are like globalists. So it makes you think, okay, well, what are they wanting with the Sumerian? Again, what are they wanting with the Sumerian records? They're going through and, data mining all of these Sumerian records. So we get this little PR kind of tidbit like, oh, how cute. Some universities using like an AI to read cuneiform. But that's not what's going on. So what's the harm in it, right? A few things. One, well, centralized, interests, that's not very helpful. We don't have an influence then in how that information gets processed or disseminated. And two, you could say, well, why are they so interested in it? You could go into the route of saying, well, maybe they are, looking for ancient technology and they're going in that route that some people have, speculated about. And, or is it because they want to revise history? Is it because, if the tablets say one thing, and we already know that they're very much against people doing their own research and interpreting these, particularly the Sumerian tablets, it's a big no-no. We don't do that. Sitchin is wrong. And there's a whole website, the late Michael Heiser, sitchiniswrong.com. And I'm not saying that Sitchin was right on everything. And I write about that extensively in my books that, it's become like a cult of personality, and that's something that is just not objective. So it's not to say he's right or wrong. It's just to say that he's getting demonized. People who do that sort of research get demonized. And why? And you could say, a whole host of things. Well, because it's inaccurate, it's this, that, and the other. Or is it because there's something to be found in those texts? Why is there such an interest in those texts? Why are they not using it for, other purposes? So, it could be all innocent, but when you keep following that money, you see that there are strange investors involved, people who have links to big oil, again, mining. Things that I found when I did my initial report on the Sumerian controversy, the same types of people, global banking elite, and people who have their hands in a whole lot of different things. And their organizations' mission statements have nothing to do with, the search for, say, like the monomyth or something, benign. It's all about global control. And so they're pumping money into the quest to use artificial intelligence to decipher these texts. One of the problems we have with the Sumerian cuneiform tablets is there's not a lot of people that can read them. There's not a lot of money put forth to fund that type of research. So there's more text than there are people who can or are available to read them. So it makes using AI sort of makes sense. But then you got to consider, well, what's going to happen with that data set? Who's feeding the data set? Is this going to, are we going to now start to look at information that's been published saying the Sumerian, tablet here says that this is what happened in the past, and it could completely be fabricated. So now it's just a little, like
it's kind of like the Mandela effect, but for real.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's revising history potentially.
Yeah. Well, and here is the ideas that have been laid out, not only by Sitchin, others, line up with paleontology, line up with anthropology, line up with archaeology. And that's the crazy thing where forget about whether Darwin was right or wrong. But we have a statement that has been made over and over again because it's true. The missing link. Mm-hmm. And so we look at, we've been taught that since we were kids, right? The missing link, the missing link, the missing link. And the facts are really, really simple. Homo sapiens sapien just appeared out of nowhere 200,000 years ago. If you look at Darwin, where he lays out the millions of years that need to be applied for actual evolution to happen, and we can go into the fossil record for just about any species and see, right, and put things together on everything but us. Right? It's like, wait a minute here, everything but us. You, the female form, the male form that we know today, right? The forehead, the jaw, the skin, the thing, that everything that makes us today happened like that. So wait a minute. You're saying that 200 there, you can't put the pieces together. Now we've got the dogma about the putting the pieces together, but the actual no, we don't have that. And then you go over to Sitchin and the Sumerian tablets and the chronology in a linear time, right? It lines up with the problems that science has. And I don't think that that is a coincidence. And getting into the Anunnaki and the Sumerian texts and the timelines of things, wait a minute here. It's the same. So ultimately, maybe that's the information. I mean, would that be the most shocking thing ever, right, to this planet? That aliens came here and did a CRISPR snip to our DNA, and then Homo sapiens sapiens just appeared. Would that blow? Yeah, I think that would freak some people out. But and that's where to put a tax on Sitchin, I could understand that. But why suppress the actual Sumerian text? Let us. We know how to use discernment. Well, maybe I said that too freely. We don't use discernment as much, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's like the woo is lining up with the science when it comes to some of our basic history here, and I think we're entitled to know that.
I agree. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that because, we can look these things up. We can read Sitchin, or we can even just go online and look at the tablets now ourselves. And if we can trust those translations, of course, but I tend to trust those translations. There's a difference between a translation and an interpretation. And I think that's, where I know it's semantics, but it is important. And so, how can we interpret these texts and what do they actually mean? And there's a lot of areas you can go with that, obviously, with the Sitchin kind of idea, or you could even talk about the great cataclysm, that could have happened and leading people to, it sort of aligns with the Atlantean, idea that maybe there was once a civilization, 12,000 plus years ago that was highly advanced, and they understood that there were signs in the sky that were that were telling them that they needed to essentially move because of a great flood coming. I mean, these things that was what was written in the Noah story, the original Noah story, which is in the Sumerian text. And in that particular story, it's interesting because it specifically discusses the individuals that sort of got that left. They didn't really say that it was a boat. It's a little different in the Sumerian. The Sumerian, though, says that they gathered up all of the greatest scientists and the people that had knowledge of all of the things that they would need to kind of have a breakaway civilization. And when they talk about the gathering of the animals, they refer to the gathering of the animals on the steppe, sort of implying that they were going to just pack everything up and, have a breakaway civilization and look for, a place to be. So, so it could be that the Anunnaki, came from that displacement of people. It could be, could be aliens. In my personal view and kind of a direction that I take it in my research, just based on my own research, is that the Anunnaki, that term is really a little generic sometimes. So, and you start to see this with the King's List, and you start to see almost like the word Lord gets thrown around, like they were lords. And then eventually you start to see that get filtered down to refer to individual kings. But something that always kind of piqued my interest about maybe the supernatural component to it was the references to their 7 sages. So these 7 sages, and again, it's like how many cultures have this 7 sage type, 7 celestial beings, or these 7 like primordial gods. I mean, so it's another interesting, convergence here. But it was believed that the 7 sages of the Anunnaki specifically were, and it clearly states they were semi-biological beings, and that they came from out of the ocean, and that they were the antediluvian gods, and that they had a connection to the stars as well. So it was like, ocean to stars. And that what they would do would be speak to or embody, inspire, somehow relay information to the Anunnaki themselves, to then teach them how to do things like agriculture, science, and all the things that later were attributed to the Anunnaki. And so it's almost like these were the gods of the gods, if that makes sense. And so that's another area of research that I don't see a lot of people looking into. And it's fascinating to me because when you see this king's list, you see that on the king's list, there are these sages that are assigned to the Anunnaki and then later to the kings. So it'll say, this is the king and this was their sage. This was their almost like spirit guide, for lack of better reference there. But it implies that there was some sort of off-world influence. And so you could, you can debate all day. Well, did the Anunnaki, did they build these spaceships in like 1960s style, metal and then fly here? Fine. Or was there something else going on? Were these individuals that were highly advanced from a different civilization who had, the ability to interface with actual extraterrestrials? And then they bring that technology to who they called the black-headed ones, which were the semi-settled hunter-gatherers that were inhabiting the region of Sumer at the time, which is interesting too, because if they themselves had dark hair and they were from that region, why would they differentiate that? So it was described that they looked different. They described the individuals who they encountered there as having dark hair and being red in color. They referred to them as the Adama, and referring to them having been red like the clay that they were made from or that they had on them. And I think what's fascinating about that is in this particular region, they have found bodies of individuals who, inhabited the area, and they are smaller in stature. I think the average for the male was about 5 foot. So, they're smaller in stature, as you may expect from being hunter-gatherer still. But they also had access to this particular red ochre that was, just in this region. It's very particular to this area. And they had used it to decorate the skulls and, make all of their ancestors sort of ornate in this red clay type ochre. And so it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that in life that they were painting themselves with this as well. And so there's some speculation about that. It's not, so out there. And but if you think then, if this holds true, if you speculate a little and think, well, there were these people there who were semi-settled and they were smaller in stature, they had dark hair, and they maybe, decked themselves out in like a red clay or an ochre. And then you have individuals who are described as being giants. And now I personally don't subscribe to them being like the giants that you see in a lot of these internet photos where there's these huge skeletons and there's like individuals who are like standing around the eye sockets like, hey, what's up? That's just no. So not Jack and the Beanstalk level giants, but still they were larger. So if you were from an area where maybe you had more advancement, you had more access to, different types of food and, genetically different, predisposed to, different things. I mean, it's just variation. So that individual could be considered a giant if they're like 6 foot something or other, and then you are like 5 foot and under. So I think there's a lot of very human elements to this Anunnaki story. And I feel like sometimes there's a distraction placed in it so that we kind of go into this maybe more of a fairy tale point of view about it, so that we don't find the truth, so to speak. And I only say that really because how do I put this? I've talked to a lot of individuals who have the means. I get contacted a lot. I write these books and stuff, so of course I get emails and people wanting to connect. And there are individuals I know that are in positions of power and resources who this is what they want to find is not the Anunnaki per se, not the way we kind of know them, but they have a connection to this King's List, and they want to have some sort of information more along the lines of how did they connect to these guides? I'm saying guides.
Yeah, but see, that right there. I think that is that is not only key, but it's not just Sumerian. All of
Right.
the ancient cultures on this planet have the same friggin' story.
Yes.
Go to Edfu in Egypt, and we keep going back to Plato. But Plato and his information, that's Egyptian. And it's right there. And when you go back to 10,000 years in history, when this was recorded already 2,000, 3,000 years ago, and you go 10,000 years before that, now we're getting into the realms of the historical record that weren't supposed to exist in the middle of the last ice age, right? And before. But India, China, right? They all have this same Nordic mythology, right?
Yeah.
And where everything is taught. There are no original thoughts, right? And there's nothing that's invented, right? Everything is taught and developed over time. And all of these cultures, Heather, talk about the same thing. Man, well, he came from the stars. Came from the stars, and that's the part of it. And if you go to the Sumerian kings list and Egypt too as well, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of years. That upsets the apple cart right there, and I think that is where all of this is headed. And it doesn't. It's not just the Sumerians.
No, it's not.
Look at it. All of the ancient texts, they all repeat the same story.
Absolutely. And another, so like in my proposition for xenoarchaeology, there are limits clearly as to what we can do currently, but there are a lot of things that we can do that we're not doing. And one of those things that I propose in the book is doing more of a serious qualitative analysis on the data through a coding process, and some of the standard things that we would do in, say, a soft science, to the myths. So if you think about something like aliens, of course you could say the word demons, angels, spirit guides. There's so many labels, and these labels, it's like the Joseph Campbell thing, a hero with 1,000 faces. We have a phenomena here with 1,000 names, and so I think it would be very beneficial if we were to use big data, maybe some artificial intelligence, to process this information and take a look at all of these past accounts and not look at them and say, well, are they right? And is this, myth better than the other? And not in a way of judgment, just collect the data mine it, look for the similarities, forget the languages. And when you do that, if you just do that in a casual way, you'll start to see striking similarities. Things like the fact that so many of the people in the past refer to these sort of off-world entities as being serpent-like. They associate them with the serpent, colorful serpents. They say you can get in touch with them through these various means, like usually methods of, say, meditation, or some sort of, deep breathing, or controlled some sort of, actual physiological thing that you can do, that you can get in touch with these. In addition to that, more of the self-control component, there are external things you can do, often, taking a particular type of drug or an elixir of some sort. Those things would garner a similar, end result, where you're seeing these sometimes called rainbow serpents. Sometimes the language is variable, and we get so caught up on the language of it. And we can say, alien. And when you say alien, we all think of, I would say, are the aliens we think of. If you say angel, you think of maybe, someone with wings. And we all know that we should know that that's not what the angels were described as actually looking like. So there's so much variability. But when you take away those labels and instead you look at the phenomena, and you can start to see a different maybe picture of it, almost like a monomyth underneath it all. And you can say, let's rip away the masks. And yes, they're important, they're interesting, it's important to look at the different cultures, but what are the similarities here? And then we'd have something, we'd have a bit of a roadmap maybe. And we could do that. We could do that here on Earth right now. And we don't have to call it, ancient aliens or searching for demons or any of that. We can just say, let's look at the data. let's take all of these accounts, let's, run it through, Qualtrics or something, and do an actual qualitative analysis on it and see what emerges from that data. And I think if we were to do that, we would be surprised. Anytime you do that sort of research, you go in thinking you're going to see these themes and trends, and you may, but often you find things you had never even considered before. And I'm just like, who's doing that? Where is this research? Why is this not being done? I think a lot of it is because we just dismiss the stories of the ancients as stories. Like, it's just they didn't understand nature, and so they had to make up these elaborate stories just to make themselves feel better. And it's like, wow, that's dismissive. The American Anthropological Association wants to dismiss, they want to say we're being dismissive, but it's like, what are you doing? You're absolutely dismissive, saying that their myths are just stories of primitive thinkers.
Well, today, where you can go and watch any Marvel movie and get a basic understanding of parallel worlds, the multiverse, and time travel, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Sumerians didn't have that. They didn't have that point of reference. The Egyptians didn't have it. Plato didn't have it. India didn't have it. China didn't have it, right? But yet the same basics of what we are fascinated with today, and again, it's about vocabulary and how we apply it. Back then, with the limited vocabulary and knowledge of anything, they thought that the heaven that was the sky, that it ended right there. It was a wall of stars. They didn't have an understanding of what planets were or any of that, and interdimensional communication. You didn't have any of that. So there's that element where did these cultures get the ideas from, unless they were taught it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here's the rub for me. Here's the physical side. You go down, this is where science needs the data set applied. Walk your slappy butt down into the Assyrian in Egypt. Walk down there and stand and look up at those giant, matching 20-foot tall, 10-foot granite blocks that weigh hundreds of tons. And there's 10 of them, right? 2 rows. Well, there's actually, anyway, stand in the middle of those, and they're all perfect. And look at that and go, explain this to me. You can forget about all of the Anunnaki text. Explain this. How did this happen? But one last thing, because this is xenoarchaeology.
Mm-hmm.
Right here.
Absolutely.
What I'm
That's where it starts.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's where it starts. Go to Ollantaytambo in Peru. Now we're on the opposite side of the world. Walk up those steps all the way to the top of that hill and go to the Sun Temple up there. It's the same thing. There are 5 ginormous, perfect cut blocks up there that are, I don't know, 10, 15 feet tall, 10 feet wide, all just sitting. And then you look at it and you're like, okay. And then just walk over and look at the steps you just climbed, right, to get up there. And how did, okay, just somebody explain this to me. Because you want to write this off, the archaeologists of the world. No, man, ancient civilizations, you're not giving them enough credit. Oh, we're not? Okay, we'll do this today. Show me how you would do this today. That's where all of those ancient texts, and then you have the physical side of this. That's xenoarchaeology. The data set of carving and moving something that big is something that you can research and study. And maybe is it magic? Well, could be too. I don't know. But it's not the way that you're telling me they did it.
Right. Well, I think that's part of it too. I don't think they want us to know. I think they want us to look in a different direction, because it's my personal belief that there are people who they know what they're looking for. And this is an area, sort of ancient civilizations and, all this sort of thing, that they want to keep as sort of just a fringe topic of interest and, leave it alone because they're interested in it. They're interested in it because they believe that there is a technology available to them that the ancients did have, how they, and so I personally believe, and I don't have a lot of great evidence for this. It's one of those unfortunate situations where I've had discussions with people and, unnamed sources and that. So, I mean, right there, I know it doesn't work real well, but so this is what informs my belief. And I put that in my books too. I give evidence. And then when I do say, hey, this is what I believe, it is what it is. So my personal belief is that there is knowledge of an ancient technology that is available if you look closely at some of the text, if you look closely at the evidence, if you look at the buildings, a lot of it is right there. And there are individuals who feel that they're entitled to that. They believe that they're entitled to it because they believe that they are a continuation of the bloodlines based on those Sumerian kings lists and the Egyptian lists, that all of those, they believe that they are the inheritors of that and that they are the ones who should rightfully have this information. And that information would be something very powerful, something like something that the Sumerians referred to as the tablet of destinies. It's sometimes referred to, some people will call it the tablets of destiny, but it's one tablet. It's the tablet of destinies. And this is a very weird, enigmatic object that a lot of people have been interested in finding. It's not quite like the Spear of Destiny, but it's like one of those objects, like a MacGuffin or something. But it's this idea that whoever has this information on this tablet will have the ultimate power, not just on Earth, but everywhere, based on a very powerful energy that can be utilized to both destroy and create. So, there's a lot to unpack there, but I do believe that there is an interest in finding, mining, if you will, the past for information on how we could get something so powerful. So whether it's for weaponization or energy or what, I tend to think it's for power. So, but so that's part of what guides me. I didn't really mean to go in that direction. I started just looking at it in an anomalous way. Then when I started doing that, I started getting emails from people and contacts and like put in different directions. And I started realizing that there's nefarious things going on here. Like, excuse my naivete, but when I started, I thought this would just be something like, who built the pyramids? And then I found out, no, wait, now there's more to this, and it's actually quite dangerous. And there are people, and I like to qualify this too. It doesn't mean I believe this. It means there are people who believe this. And if there are things that sound a little like crazy and hard to believe, fine. But it doesn't matter. What matters to me is not whether or not it's true. I mean, that does kind of matter. It is fascinating.
Of course it matters.
Of course.
Yeah.
But what kind of doesn't matter is whether or not it's true, insofar as that the people in great positions of power believe it's true and they act on those beliefs. And so it does have a real world effect on us. If there are people in positions of power going out, spending money, a country's blood and treasure, quite literally, to go after some sort of ancient tech that they think could make them almighty and powerful in the universe, to create and destroy and ascend and actually become a god, whether it's true or not, again, it is cool. It matters. It has implications. But so for the people who might think, well, that's crazy. Yes. Okay, fine. But people who are not necessarily thought of as crazy believe this. And so it's vitally important to the conversation, not to just dismiss it and say, well, that just sounds like a fairy tale or science fiction. No, even if you don't have a belief, you should be concerned that our elected officials and sometimes unelected officials have other things in mind that they're doing when they go after and fund all of these ventures into, whether it's theologians trying to figure out how we would handle disclosure, or something as strange as collecting ancient tablets. So, and then I think that's the greater picture, is that we're being put on wild goose chases a lot of times, so that they can continue their actual, maybe not so wild goose chase to find something that they believe can give them the ultimate power. I think that's a free energy thing.
That's why somebody like Eric von Daniken is so influential, because when Chariots of the Gods was first introduced, now that, to talk about rolling the rock uphill, right? He had it from the word go. But the interest in that, which I would say it created an industry for sure. But the reason why all of that happened, whether it's Pumo Punku or the Great Pyramid or the lines of Nazca, which I've personally flown over, and I can tell you it's about as crazy as it gets. And to see that was actually done by somebody somehow. The reason why it grew into what it is because people want this information. People resonate with it. If they didn't want it, they would ignore it. And that's the danger, right? Is how long have you known, and have you actually been suppressing this from us? Oh, wait a minute. You've known, you've gone and done these translations, you're pursuing this, but you're telling us we're not allowed to, and that we're crazy if we have these thoughts. They're, how do I say it? They're creating their own problems. Yeah. That's the problem. That's the problem with disclosure. That truly is. How long have you known? I'm going to pull up. I'm just going to do this for fun because we're talking about this now. So I'm just going to pull up a quick image here. And this to me is an example of, okay, how long have you known? What's really actually going on here? Because this doesn't make any sense. Now I'm going to pull up. I took these pictures myself. Okay. All right. So let me just, okay, I'm ready to go. But this is the problem. I'm going to show you the problem. I'm going to show you the problem right now. All right, here we go. I took this picture, Sacsayhuaman, right? Now, look at that. Those are people. Look at that, right? Now, that's one shot. Now let's back this up. Now let's go to this. Now let's go to this. These are different sections. There's that. Okay. Now, when you go and you look at something as crazy as this, now I've just shown you the close-ups. This goes forever. Those are people. Those aren't ants. And it goes as far as my camera will go, right? All the way down, 3 levels high, all the way down the hill, right? Look at this. Look at this. Stones as big as a house, right? Look at the site, right? And you go and you see something like that, and you cannot brush this off. You just can't go, they just did it. No, they didn't. Stop. Stop. Yeah. You can, and people go and see these images now for themselves. You don't have to go and how do I say this? Go down some rabbit hole and go onto some fringe website and go into the forbidden zone. No, you can walk up and see that for yourself. That's as big as a house. That is ginormous. And yes, the corners, the engineering. Okay, yeah, all of that comes into play. Tell me how. That's it. I'm not even interested in the why.
Yeah.
The why part. Okay. All right. Tell me how that came from 40 miles away over those mountains at 13,000 feet. And somebody just woke up one day and said, we're going to do this. And the whole country gets involved and starts moving these stones. No. How did that happen? And it's an incredible thing to see. And that is part of the suppression of this knowledge. Look at this.
Astounding.
That's crazy. That's insane to me. And it's the same at the Assyrian. It's all over Cambodia. It's all over India, right? It's everywhere. It's not just one culture, one anomaly in our history. No, it's everywhere. It's everywhere you go. And now I want to go back to your point that you made earlier. It's not necessarily the data. It's not necessarily that. When you go to these sites, or you go to the Sumerian text, or you go to any of the other ancient texts around the world, and you go and you read that, you come away with more questions than answers. And you find out that the answers that we have been taught through academia are wrong. That's the issue that we have arrived at today. You go to this stuff, and all you're doing, you said it yourself with your research, you just led into more questions. You're not necessarily getting the answers that you seek, but what you are finding out is that what we have been taught is dogma.
Another thing to consider too is, this point that you make about them not wanting us to know, because then we would say, well, how long have you known? And that. Imagine all of the people who have had experiences. A lot of experiencers report very negative interactions. I'm sure people who have had almost a cursed life because of this. It's not something that was just, I saw something in the sky, that you have that, but there are some people who have literally been traumatized their whole lives. Generationally, there have been people who have had this, these encounters. What would happen if a huge group of them found out? Your governments, the people in power, they've known about what this is all of this time, and then they let these things happen to you, or they couldn't stop it, or however you want to frame it, but your government knew. So, if a government's job, in our, Western democratic sense is to first, keep us safe, well, then it's a dereliction of duty if they weren't able to keep their citizens safe. And so it's more backlash. It's how is it that you knew about this and did nothing?
Can you imagine the court system?
No, it would be
the legal system. The legal system.
Oh my gosh!
And
cattle mutilations, the farmers, the lawsuits,
right.
all of that. Thing.
All of that. All of that. Yeah. It's that's being discussed.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah,
absolutely.
We've got the petrodollars being discussed, the religious aspect, Wall Street's being discussed. There are days spent on, okay, man, but do we have enough public defenders and prosecutors in the federal system to defend and go against what would potentially happen from this? There is the legal side of this. And even in our own community, Heather, we don't discuss that aspect of it enough.
Not enough, I don't think. I really don't. I feel like it's gone in a direction of, again, everybody's had their own experiences, but I do feel like it's gone in a direction maybe a little too close to this idea that they are, benevolent, beings. And maybe some people have had those experiences, but there are a lot of other people that have not, and they could attest to this being maybe not so benevolent. And again, this could be explained in a host of different ways. Maybe there's more than one type. Maybe those are discussions to be had, but you can't discount the experiences people have had that have been not so great. And you're right to say that in terms of the legal issues. And it's probably no coincidence then that one of the fastest growing segments of the legal industry is global space law. Right here where I am in Cleveland, the Cleveland State University has the Global Space Law Center, and they work on all of these questions a lot. And it's happening. It's being dealt with. It's just we're not privy to it, I suppose. You have to go digging, no pun intended.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of talk about waxing philosophical. Let's go there for a second, because I would say in a general sense that human beings are good people. Generally speaking, we've got our bad elements, sure. And I mean, I wake up couple days a week, and I want to drive around and throw bricks through windows. Okay, all right. It's not like you don't want to duck out behind the gym and have a smoke in high school, right? We have that side to us, but generally speaking, we are good people. And we're talking about benevolent ET races and who is bad and who is good. Let me tell you about a bad day. A bad day for somebody is a fish. When you and your dad are out there in the rowboat, right? And you snag a fish, pull it out of the water, and you take that thing back to the campsite where you gut it, chop its head off, right? Throw it in a frying pan and eat it. Wait a minute. What about the baby fish when dad didn't come back home? That's a bad day for that fish, right? Getting hooked and pulled out and thrown into an ice chest. Right? Like, what's happening? Wait, whoa. I was just doing my thing in the pond, man. What's going on here? Now, does that make you and your dad bad people? No. And so we do the same thing as scientists and biologists and going into the rainforest and grabbing some new species and bringing it back to study, bag and tag it. Right? We don't think about the cultural implications of breaking up some species family, right? we don't think about that stuff. And so are we at the level, are we bacteria to ET? Right? Are we just right? I don't know. But that's another deep philosophical existential issue here. It's not malevolent or benevolent. It's just the way it is, right?
So it's absolutely. I've heard people argue that, well, why would they be interested in us if they're so much more intelligent? We're just nothing. Why would they care? We'd be like ants to them. Well, sure, but you know what? We study ants. Like we could make the same argument for us. We're so much better than the ants. They're so little and minuscule and inconsequential. But there are entomologists. There are people who take their whole life and research the ants. And so are they bad? Are they good? Do they just exist? But at the same time, we may very well just be like little ants on this blue planet, but extraterrestrials are still interested in us. And maybe that's just data collection. Maybe it's just neutral.
Of course. Why not? We're doing the same things. So yeah, and I have zero issues with that. When you, oh man, I again, just think of going out and mowing the lawn. All right. Your dad did it every weekend. What are you wiping out, right, with your lawnmower? The insects and the ecosystem, and you're just chopping it up into little bits. And then you come back and you've got a beautiful lawn and you put the lawnmower away and you make sure you've got gas in the garage and the gas can so you can do it again in a week. And to think about the insects going, oh man, here it comes. Right? Well, we have to look at it in those terms. And it's not like ET. Can we, okay, hello, little ant. I'm going to teach you about the internet. So, are we prepared? Is our knowledge base, Heather? Are we at the level of an intelligent race that is able to overcome space and time and distance, right? And arrive here at this planet and just come down and lay a bunch of knowledge on us? Are we able to comprehend and understand that? I'm not so sure that we can. Now, the Anunnaki are coming down and teaching us how to quarry rocks and fire and maybe introduce the domestication of wheat or whatever it may be. Those are simple things. It's a whole nother thing to go beyond what we are able to comprehend and understand.
Could be infinite.
They're totally infinite.
Finite
Totally.
minds. Yeah.
Totally.
Currently.
Totally. Where can everybody go and find your stuff and reach out to you?
www.drheatherlynn.com. It's drheatherlynn.com. That's where you can find everything. I'm also on YouTube. My podcast is The Midnight Academy. I just started it. So I have a couple shows up and we're still in like a beta testing phase. And so there'll be some changes here and there. But yeah, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the usual places.
Man, it's been too long. Really enjoyed tonight, Heather. Thank you so much. And I look forward to our next conversation. So invite me on your podcast.
Oh, well, you're invited. Come on anytime.
Let's flip it around. Let's flip this thing around.
I got questions for you.
I'll put you to the test. I'll make you work for it. Okay. All right. Heather, behave and be well. Don't stop what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Heather Lynn. Yes, the links are below. We've got it over on social media and we have it on our website. Perfect conversation tonight. I told you I was going to be able to get all of my favorite things in tonight, and we did just that. I want to remind everybody what's going on tomorrow night. Brigitte Barclay is with us, and we are going to be talking about the 1993 Brentwood, California alien abduction. Hers. All of that tomorrow night right here on Fade to Black. Thank you, Heather. Perfect show. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Genocide. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. And this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night with Brigitte, I want you to be safe. Go Backley Tappy.